right, well, here we go. It's the System Failure Podcast number 22. How's it going, Nate?
Hey, Brian. Excellent this week. How about yourself? What did you think of our last pod when we had our first ever guest, the venerable captain, on board?
I thought it was exciting to have the captain on the podcast. I'm like, my opinion about drug consumption hasn't really changed.
Well, you are staunchly against it, and Stuart is staunchly for it. And so I am in the middle, I'm the impressionable one. I'll bounce back and forth to whoever's made the most recent compelling argument.
Well, I guess my position was if you're gonna smoke weed or do psychedelics on the full moon, I think that'd probably be a reasonable policy. But in terms of trying to better yourself, there's just no way that smoking weed every day. I'm not really sure if that's what the captain's position is, but there's just no way, man.
But on the other hand, never smoking weed, and this point came up on the last pod, is also a disaster. Because you end up with that calcified mind, unable to consider new possibilities, and you just end up with your Plinko ball rolling down the same routes and courses that it always rolls down, and you never get anywhere that way either. So I think it's got to be some middle of the road, and for me, and I would guess for you, you'll have to confirm. There's this element of discipline once you start in smoking the weed, I guess psychedelics are not like that at all. Psychedelics, it's like going on vacation to when you get home, you're just glad to be home back on terra firma. You're like Robin Hood in that 1991 Kevin Costner treatment where he's, sinks to his knees and kisses the sand at the base of the white cliffs of Dover. Psychedelics really do not, they don't foment habitual use, I suppose, or at least that's been my experience. Usually you're just glad you got out alive, one more time.
Well, only if you're having a problem, or I guess I don't necessarily agree that not doing drugs leads to a calcified brain. And I guess I'm rehashing the same points. It's good to have done drugs if you are a calcified person. The people, who have never done drugs do seem to be lacking, I guess. But I don't think you need to be doing drugs though. If, you sort of know what you're trying to accomplish, I guess. And you have some idea how to go about it. It is kind of a good thing, if you're in your probably early 20s or, maybe 25 to 30 is probably a good time to be doing drugs.
Yeah, you're right. We're just rehashing episode 21 here. But I think that figuring out what you're supposed to be doing or what the best use of your time is, drugs are good for that. But they're not themselves the best use of your time. Right? That's reading the chart is great for navigational strategy if you're sailing like a white-sailed ship of the line during the age of exploration, but you don't want to be studying maps and charts and then just keep going round and round without actually getting out there and and prosecuting the course you've set or whatever, I suppose.
All right. Well, do we have anything else we want to say about the podcast with the captain?
Just that I thought it was a lot of fun to have a little bit of fresh blood in the mix. You and I will come to the same conclusions every week, but it's nice to have someone with a third perspective. So I think we ought to do more guests more often. So we maybe we can get. I know a couple other people personally we could invite in here, and maybe we could even, once we start to get bigger, get some luminaries like economist Dr. Michael Hudson to call in on his webcam from Brooklyn and give us the lowdown on Marxist economics or something like that. That would be good. So we'll start with whoever amongst our personal contacts is worthy of giving a voice to, and I suppose we'll go up from there. But I really thought it was nice to have some fresh blood mixed in, as mentioned.
Well, the captain did send me a Venmo for $250, so I could buy another set of cans and a mic and a stand.
Nice. Okay. All right.
So,
well, it's fully on then, eh?
That's some solid financial backing for the podcast there.
Well, other small personal tidbits. We went out to a live show with our dad last night, and it was a fine performance. Food was better than expected. Venue better than expected. But I had the same problem I always have with live music and performances, and that is the insane start. How do people do this? Where you have no idea what time the act you've paid for, the ticket, you're settling in, and you just got no idea what time they're going to stride on stage, and so you're just sitting there. And I was thinking to myself, is it that I hate not being in control of the situation? But I don't think it's that. I don't mind the 10-hour flight to Istanbul and then the second 10-hour flight from Istanbul to Cape Town. that's easy for me because like a time you're going to arrive is printed on the ticket and the time you're going to depart is printed on the ticket, so you know exactly what to expect. So I think it's just having just flapping in the breeze and just have no idea how long you have to wait for the talent to stride on stage. So we had there was like a lengthy delay between when we finished dinner and when eventually the entertainment walked onto the stage, and I was cursing the fates again that I had signed up for another live music event, and so I would just have to mention here that the boys from Pink Floyd deserve a lot of credit because they're always going on stage at the right moment. In fact, I think when we last went and saw their drummer Nick Mason, I was taking a picture of the empty stage. We rolled in at the time on the ticket said 7 p.m. And we rolled in at like 6:57, thinking, and you had looked on the what is the website?
Yeah, Last FM.
Last FM. They tell you all the set lists from prior, from all the big acts worldwide, and it was like the average time is like 90 minutes for Nick Mason to stride on stage. But those guys walked out on stage as I was taking the picture to send Tracy, saying, hey, we've arrived, we got our seats. They strolled out onto stage, totally surprised me. It was really a transcendent moment. The fact that the music was actually starting at the time that was printed on the ticket blew my mind. It was insane.
It's the only concert I've ever been to that actually started at the stated time.
Yeah. And they started off with One of These Days, which is a real banger. So that was my mind was totally blown from the first from 7:01 onward. So that was great, great experience. I remember going to see Lana Del Rey. I mean, loved her like lounge act era, but like she came on stage like hours late. And by then, this was at TD Garden in Boston. And by that time, we ordered an alcoholic beverage, but of course the beverage you get at TD Garden is barely endowed with any booze at all. It's mostly sugar. And by the time Lana Del Rey finally strode onto the stage, that thing had long worn off, and I had just lapsed into a state of terrible morale. And that's just no way to start a show. I just can't believe it. You're just dinking around, and like some artists, some musical acts like Madonna are famous for just showing up crazily late, just whatever time they feel like. I don't understand how do like 20-year-old kids enjoy this? That's always been a huge barrier to me in live music. It's been the barrier.
I saw something about apparently some kind of lawsuits being filed against Madonna for starting too late.
Wow. See, that's the kind of lawsuit I can get behind.
Yeah, that would be awesome if somehow that goes through and then the status quo changes. I think ultimately it's a problem of, well, just at the base level at your like local clubs and stuff, like here in Portland, maybe at Geno's on Congress Street. I mean, they get 4 acts and it's not like, well, lots of people want to play music. And so you're kind of getting taken advantage of, I guess. And I don't know, you just have like probably a headliner and then 3 other acts maybe that are going to play. And I guess that sort of cultivates an expectation that the headliner is just going to show up whenever they want, I guess, when you get to that level.
Well, yeah, I think there should definitely be financial penalties if you do not, like, if you sell someone a ticket, right, for an event, you ought to have to say what time the event will be taking place on the tickets. And, 5-10 minutes and 15 minutes even, a delay. We can all live with that, but it's just like, just total disregard for the schedule of the audience and the time, how they all have to plan their logistics to get there, to arrive there, and to get home, and just blowing all those people off. I don't know. I can't understand how these acts like Madonna, who don't have any regard for their like people who pay for their lavish lifestyles, how do they continue to get paid? It's amazing, absolutely incredible.
It is crazy that you have to go like on Reddit and see what time your act is actually going to come on stage. I imagine at some point maybe this will change, and then it'll just be like a vestige of the past, like cars without airbags or without seatbelts and stuff. So maybe that'll change someday.
I want to know if the Germans put up with this nonsense. I mean, those people. I mean, I've never been to Germany, but I did fly Lufthansa during the COVID epidemic several times, and those people were nuts about rules and timing. And so maybe the Germans have it figured out, and we should be copying their model, or maybe not. Maybe it's just as bad in Germany anywhere else. I wonder. I'll have to ask. I know some Germans. I'll have to send them a note and ask them the answer to that question. Ugh.
The other thing about that show is at the Stone Martin Art Center is just the chairs we're sitting in were brutal too, just to be sitting around like waiting for hours for the show to start.
Yeah, I think if you're a tall person, you and I are both 6'4", and are you 6'4" or 6'5"?
I don't know, 6'4.5" maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we're like none of the furniture is commodious enough to suit our frames, and so you end up hunched over in some wretched position. And so you need to have. I just need to know. I can tolerate misery. I just need to know when the misery is going to end. I just can't be open-ended misery. I guess I can't. I guess I could even handle open-ended misery. I can't have paid for open-ended misery. That's when you really start crawling out of your skin. Oish.
Yeah, they sure take advantage of you.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, food and venue better than expected, but the talent didn't come on stage till later than expected, and that was it's hard to keep morale up under those circumstances. But I guess I've made my point. Hopefully, Madonna will get wind of this podcast someday and reform her sinful ways.
I agree with your point that Pink Floyd is the best band of all time.
Oh, they're unbelievable. Like, you won't wait more. I mean, probably David Gilmour strolled on stage at like 7:20 or 20 minutes past the printed ticket time. Roger's always within. Roger Waters, the talent bassist, always in 10-15 minutes. Pretty good.
Right. Well, Roger usually starts his shows, it says 8 and he comes on at 8:25. And I think David Gilmour is more like an 8:05 or 8:10 situation. Yeah.
Wow. Well, see, I don't remember it being that bad, but you've been to a lot more of these Pink Floyd concerts than I have.
I mean, you remember at Madison Square Garden and, we missed the first song or whatever.
Yeah. So we weren't. Yeah. Maybe I didn't note the time because we weren't sitting in our seats just staring at our watch, going, "I wonder what time the thing we paid for is going to start." No way to know. Totally unpredictable.
All right. Well, anyway.
Well, I guess we can put belly aching about live music to bed. Maybe our children will inherit a better world where you can just go to the venue when the person's playing. You don't have to there's not all this flim flam.
It'll probably be a concert in like man, what do the kids play? It's not Minecraft. Fortnite. Yeah, that's right. It'll be Fortnite concerts.
All right. Well, yeah. See, there you go. That could work. Okay, so it is January. It's going to be February next week. So we are the 2024 election season's officially kicked off. And so we have now passed the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary. And those contests didn't really tell us. I mean, they were just not surprised. The Donald just won them both, right, on the Republican side.
Well, primary season's like already over, it would seem, right? I mean, depending on what happens, I guess, in South Carolina.
Yeah, we've got that Super Tuesday business that comes up about a month. But yeah, right. I mean, the primary season really doesn't seem relevant in 2024 because the Donald's going to obviously be the Republican nominee. And do you think Biden's going to be the Democratic nominee? I do feel like, I mean, that's presumptively, he's the presumptive nominee, so presumably he'll get the nod, except for he's collapsed in the polls thanks to this business between Gaza and Israel. And so, are they going to try to sideline Joe Biden and his erstwhile VP Kamala Harris and shove someone else down our throats? I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think we're going to get Big Mike as the that's Michelle Obama.
Oh my God! You think they're going to just try to shoehorn Michelle in at the last second, huh?
Well, yeah, 100%.
Well, maybe. It does seem like there's no my fundamental read on the 2024 election is that in 2020 the pizza was about half and half. Four slices of us are. We have a mortgage that's payable, and we have a job that's tolerable, and we just want things to continue on, and we don't want to upheave our whole civilization. And then four slices in 2020 were like, this is this is completely unlivable. Something has got to change, something has got to give, and the only person that seems to even faintly give a limp-wristed gesture in that direction is the Donald, so we're going to vote for the Donald. But I think now it's like 5 slices are in that camp of total dissatisfaction, and 3 slices are like, we just want to continue I'm happy with my mortgage, I'm happy with my job, I don't want a big shakeup. Well, that's what I think.
If you're our reptilian overlords, I guess I can see 2 ways to play this out. And this gets to why that I'm kind of not excited. I've done some advocating for the Donald on here, I guess, and now I'm not excited about the Donald.
Why? What has the Donald done to earn your disfavor?
Well, here's what it is. If you're our reptilian overlords, you can let this play out in 2 ways. And so one is to, put in, well, it's going to be like Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. And if you'd run President Biden, then you'd expect him to lose. And so if that happens, you get to have the Donald as president. And, well, the reason I'm out on the Donald is because I think that the people in charge, know how to contain the situation. I mean, it's like it's like a zit or a tumor or a cyst or something that forms around an infection. Like, I mean, it seems like the media,
like an immune response. You're saying, like when a splinter, like an outside force, like the Donald, enters the battlefield morphs around it and has like an immune response to adapt and
well, right. I mean,
it.
You can expect the Donald to say like some truths about the system, like he. Well, like he was saying, you should tax. I mean, he doesn't pay taxes because he's smart, right? And like he says, like truths about the system that the establishment people don't like. Well, anyway, like they know how to like contain this response, though. Like they know how to get the public like mad at the Donald, and so. Well, like people supported the war on the Ukraine. I don't know. To me, it seems like people supported the war on Ukraine because they hate the Donald and they felt like they were getting one back on his pal Putin by supporting this crazy war in the Ukraine. I guess we've talked about it. And also, like leading up to the COVID, I mean, initially the Trump supporters were terrified of this virus out of China. Well, there were these videos from China on Reddit, like leaking of people just dropping to the deck and flopping like a fish out of China. And there was a lot of hype among the right or the Trumpers that this was going to be a crazy disease. And then all the establishment on the left was against wearing masks, and they were against Donald Trump's vaccine. And then in a crazy psyop, they managed to like flip the narrative, and then the MAGA people were against wearing masks and the vaccine, and the establishment normies were their fear of the virus knew no bounds, right? I mean, that's all made possible by how the establishment gets people to feel about the Donald. And so, I mean, I'm 100% sure that if we get the Donald elected, that we're going to get hit by something. I mean, they're already talking about like Disease X at Davos, They're talking about like on CBS, and also like Alex Jones and Jimmy Dore and stuff too. And Russell Brand. But this Disease X business, they're already like preparing for it. And so you can be sure that if the Donald gets elected, our reptilian overlords will know how to use that situation to create further crackdowns and carry out the agenda of the World Economic Forum and get us eating bugs and whatnot, carbon tax credits and all kinds of things, lockdowns, so they can go that way. Or if they want to, I don't know, not crack down as hard, they can put Michelle Obama in there and go that way and just continue our foreign policy of like blowing stuff up in other countries and just doing what we have been doing in the past, right? So I guess that's my feeling.
So you feel like the Donald is controlled opposition? Would you go so far as to suggest that?
Well, I just think he's opposition that they can control like their mass response to. And so, I mean, it's not like he already has the buy-in from the banks and, from like the Zionist crew for, moving the embassy from Jerusalem or whatever.
The embassy to Jerusalem, right? Wasn't it not located there, and the Donald moved it there?
Well, whatever it is, it appeased the Zionist crew.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think if the Donald gets elected, I think it's just going to be like a repeat of what happened last time, and it's going to be a huge disaster. And so we should probably hope that they put a Big Mike out there.
Well, if I really search my feelings, see, I'm one of these people that's always been on the side of the pizza where because I had student loan debt that was $1,200 a month, that was like, but I only made $2,000 a month, and I had just had no choice but to pay. So for me, since like 2010, the economic pizza pie has been, the economic situation has been totally uncountenanceable, and so. It's not that I would expect the Donald to do anything. I mean, his first administration, all he did really was raise taxes, was cut taxes on the rich. That was like the only real legislative achievement that the Donald was able to perform between 2016 and 2020 that I can really remember. He didn't get us into any new foreign entanglements. I guess that's deserves credit for that. But I don't really believe that the Donald's going to do anything to change the status quo. But I really did get a lot of satisfaction from the people on the other side of the pizza who are satisfied with the situation, who have the Donald derangement syndrome, like our friend Sam Harris, for instance. Like, if the Donald got reelected, I would very much look forward to his podcast because it would be emotionally satisfying. But it wouldn't really solve any problems. I guess I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that electing the Donald will solve any of our problems. I think that will just be a sign that the situation's deteriorating further, and probably in a manageable way by the elites, as you're saying.
Well, yeah, the Donald doesn't really do that much to change the status quo, but I mean, he did though, like call Hillary Clinton like a crook, and I guess the ramifications of that have been, well, it's really caused this like splintering of our society, and it's got a lot of people to stop drinking the establishment water, right?
Well, yeah. So when I was in my early 20s, I discovered the aforementioned Mr. Sam Harris, or Dr. Sam Harris, and his fellow atheists. And that was a great moment because I felt like I got permission to criticize the religion we grew up in, which was a huge breath of fresh air. And it did seem kind of like the 2016 election, the Donald kind of gave everyone permission to, it was like out there in a totally defensible position that the Clintons were like crooks. So that was really satisfying and exciting. But again, to your point, no policy, Donald won the 2016 election and just nothing really happened during his tenure other than a lot of nonsense about whether or not the Donald was an agent of Moscow or not. And that aforementioned tax, he got like totally screwed by the House Democrats on the trying to reform like Medicare and Medicaid. And I don't all the other he didn't really have a lot of accomplishments. So yeah, I guess I agree. I think that you were talking about disease X moments ago, and it's very interesting to me how much disease or medicine, and I think I would even connect that to spirituality, because it's only been recently that doctors and priests were different professions. Used to be they were for most of history the same people, but it's very interesting to me how disease like the plague always fits into these when systems start collapsing and failing. There was major plagues during the fall of Rome, for example, and the Apennine plague and the Justinian plague after the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, and then of course there's the Black Death in the 1349, and then now we're back with the COVID, which doesn't have a crazy death toll, but it does have this role, like the fall of the authorities seems to involve disease over and over again. And so that makes me excited about RFK, the candidacy of RFK as independent, right? Because I feel like that dude would actually make an attempt to revamp the regulatory agencies that are supposed to be protecting us and gutting the what do you call it? Capture. When your regulatory agency is captured by the agencies, it's regulatory capture, right? That's the word for it.
Yeah.
Like he would actually, that's what really draining the swamp would be like, right? It would be like going into like FDA and the Justice Department and the CDC and actually getting rid of the corporate mascots who run those joints and actually improving the way the economy works. Now that would be to the detriment of corporate profits, but I think that's the real battle here: corporate profits versus the common good. That has to be sorted out, and the presidential election of 2024 merely a proxy thereof. And I don't know. The only issue with RFK is his deplorable business. He has the same positions like Biden and the Donald on Israel, which is really odd. But I think it could be very interesting. Like, I really think that we could, like, if we get RFK, I don't think we're going to have another disease regime attempt to broaden the government powers using disease as the excuse du jour.
Yeah, well, that is the thing about RFK is he's like probably the only one who can get in there and keep the ship pointed into the waves if something like that happens, right? And so, I mean, I think you really got to hope that RFK can get enough traction here to somehow get through. I think we all really have to try to make that happen, right?
Another national favorability poll came out with RFK way ahead of the Donald and Biden, like by double digits, which is awesome. So I really wonder if the media, like it seems like the mainstream media, I don't really watch it, but it seems like they're totally mum. They don't talk about RFK. And they just... I am seeing like RFK yard signs popping up around Cape Elizabeth. So I don't know. It's hard to know how much. I wonder how much to really handicap RFK's chances at the end of the year.
Well, yeah. See, if you're our reptilian overlords, I mean, if you have this option of like the Donald or RFK, well, I mean, you gotta love the Donald, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's not good. That's a part of the problem of the Donald here. But people, I think it is imperative because of the COVID. Do they get RFK? Although it's just going to be, I just can't fathom what it's going to be like when the friggin' COVID happens again. And it's like guaranteed to happen again, right? Like what are the chances that we can get through our lifetime without another one of these crazy lockdowns, right?
Let's hope not. Hey, but look, I did see an article this week that the Donald camp is considering RFK as a possible VP pick for the Donald. I guess hopefully that'd be one way maybe of neutering RFK's influence, right? Maybe we should hope for not that.
Dang. Well, it seems like unlikely to me. I mean, the Donald, I don't know. He's always like, yeah, I'm gonna, release the Kennedy documents. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, UFO, nothing.
And you want him to pardon Julian Assange, and the UFO thing, and it was just a whole lot of nothing really on anything important. And but I think if he did do that, well, that would be incredible. Really, I mean, just to have him there and with that kind of visibility and talking would probably go a long way. And if RFK doesn't have a real chance of winning, and somehow that's something he can do instead, I guess I'd be down. We got to get RFK in there.
Yeah, I think RFK has a real chance of winning. The dude's polling in the low 20s. And when you take out everyone who's younger than 42, he's beating the Donald Biden in a three-way race for president. So I feel like as long as he can get on the ballot in all 50 states, the other rumor I heard was that he might to take the Libertarian nomination, RFK, so that he would just automatically be on the ballot in all 50 states. But I think there's a problem with the Libertarian. There's a problem with the Libertarian ideology, and then what's happening is sending huge amounts of armaments to Israel is completely incompatible with Libertarian notions or ideals or doctrines. So I don't really know how that would work. But I don't know. Maybe RFK will change his position on the Gaza. I don't know. It feels like like you said. Even though we should be kicking into high gear here for the primaries, it does feel like we're in a lull while we just kind of wait for the chips to fall and find out if the Democrats are going to try to press ahead. I guess we have to wait a couple of months to find out if they're going to try to press ahead with Biden. When's the convention? Over the summer, right? So they have till the summer to replace Biden if they're going to do it.
I think the idea is they would do this at the convention, switch out Biden. So it's going to be definitely a couple month lull here on the political front. See, I have the same foreboding sense. The foreboding sense when I'm on the mushies that I used to have has definitely materialized in the real world.
Well, that's no good.
The COVID and stuff is just completely insane. People are completely out of control. Yeah. It was definitely a crazy regime of terror, basically, the COVID years. And to your point about, people just trust these medical authorities. We have such a problem with authority. It's such an issue. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, the medical establishment has no idea how to help you with any problem you're having, and we have the worst health, I don't know, among all the civilized countries, and man, it's just completely crazy.
You want to shake people grab them by the lapels of their jacket and shake them and be like, have you not noticed that the priesthood, the medical establishment, the medical priesthood is foreseeing a collapse in public health that we've not seen anything like in all of history. Something is horribly wrong. It's just, but look, I mean, if I get in a car accident and have a compound fracture, I would like to be taken to, main med here. They're pretty good at triaging that kind of trauma. But when it comes to long-term healthcare decisions, they're completely incompetent.
Well, they can get you a nice prescription for Ozempic.
Yeah, that's just what I need. Man, I feel like the Ozempic, it's going to have some hideous side effects. There's just no free lunch. You just can't just lose weight. And what I've heard is you put the weight back on and more if you ever should dare to go off Ozempic. But it's like a diabetes drug, isn't that right? That's what it was originally intended for, but it turns out it causes you to lose weight by screwing with your blood sugar or something like that. Isn't that how it works?
Man, I do not know the particulars, but I would agree. It's just going to be a matter of time until there's an Ozempic recall.
Ugh.
And man,
you see the ads on TV. Do you suffer from mesothelioma? Did you take Ozempic between the years of 2023 and 2024? You may be entitled to compensation. Oh, yeah, it gives you the willies.
Yeah, I just don't know how people trust our medical authorities. I guess it starts at a young age with like these vaccines and stuff, and I guess people. I don't. It's crazy that they're still hawking the COVID vaccine for children. There's just
nuts.
There's just absolutely no logic behind this. Yeah, I don't know. And our doctors were also like getting bonuses for each COVID thing. Did you see about this?
Yeah. If the death certificate says they died, of COVID, then you get more funding or something like that.
Well, there was just also like doctors were getting paid bonuses for each person they vaccinated, and so it's just completely crazy. I don't know why. I guess just if your idea of health is like even worse than what the system can do for you. If you're like, well, I'm just going to drink Mountain Dew and eat at McDonald's, then I guess you need to trust the medical authority. But if you have like if you like pay attention and can notice like what makes you feel poor, then you're better off than dealing with these crazy a-holes.
There's like a relationship between economic systems and like the credibility we give to authority. Like you get these systems arise under a certain set of circumstances, and they outcompete other systems because they're well suited to said circumstances. And you build up these huge systems of economic production and distribution, but then circumstances change and those systems start to decay and they start to work not so well. When you're on the upswing, it's easy to believe in what the authorities are telling you. In fact, when you're in the presence of this huge machine that's working efficiently, it's easy to be humble and accept like what the dictates of authority. But when the machine stops working so well, and it's a really interesting time to be alive because you can see that the wheels are coming off the wagon. But if you're one of the first people to notice it, you end up in this weird twilight zone where you're like talking to people who think that they have this total faith in authority, and you're like, well, I don't know. From where I'm sitting, it looks like the authorities looks like the emperor has no clothes on at all. And so you just live in this different reality from most people. And I think now most people, I hope that in 2024, the election will show that most people are totally dissatisfied with the status quo. Like 60% of us, 55% of us, where it was 50-50 in 2020, and it was like 45-55 in 2016. But it is interesting to note that when the titanic gears of industry are meshing smoothly and efficiently, it's easy to have faith in authorities. But when those gears start breaking down and you start having dysfunction, there's like a lag between the manifestation of the dysfunction and the realization, the popular realization that the authorities are incompetent. And so we're in a weird state where half of us have figured out the authorities are incompetent, and half of us would really just like things to continue, would like the status quo to continue. Very, very eerie and weird and Twilight Zone-like time to be making a podcast.
Well, Scott Adams is always just talking about how like people are watching two different movies, and so we've got all these problems with society. And you're watching this one movie where like we need to trust the establishment and like the Donald's making everything worse. And then there's the other movie where the establishment's a disaster and we'd probably take the Donald over, the establishment. But, we want RFK Jr., at least for the movie that you and I are probably watching. Yeah,
it seems like a lot of people crossed that bridge when after October 7th and in the Israeli response to October 7th. And more to the point, the response of the military, the American diplomatic political class. Our diplomacy with regard to Israel from our American diplomatic class has really, I think, sent a lot of people who would be in the camp where, well, the Donald's screwing everything up and we just got to trust the authorities. I think a lot of people have switched sides to, okay, something's horribly wrong.
Well, it's going to come down to like which story is more powerful, right? It's going to be a battle in the trenches, I would think.
Well, by powerful, I think one story is truer than the other story. It's like it's just a matter of questioning the assumptions that you're bringing to the table. It's just that the assumptions from 1970 are no longer valid, and we have to wake up and realize that. But
I guess I feel like it's like the battle between like capitalism and socialism. And I guess my opinion would be that capitalism has been a more powerful idea, and that's kind of why we're in the situation we're in, I guess. Right?
It's been a more functional system. Yeah. Well, but that wasn't always the case. There was a time when feudalism was the dominant system, the economic system, at least in Europe, and the capitalists had to try to challenge that, and there was much blood shed over the proposition.
Well, I guess I feel like, socialism is kind of a truer idea, but capitalism has the power to, we to send troops over to, fight the proletariat in the Russian Revolution, right?
Yeah.
And disrupt every people's uprising in Central America. And so it doesn't necessarily matter what the truer idea is if it's more powerful or true. There's some core, to some extent, power equals true, right?
Not so sure I agree. Just looking at the achievements of the Soviet Union under communism, I mean, they went from a land of castles and peasants and princes to beating the U.S. in the space race in a single generation, just rapid industrialization. And the Chinese have played a similar trick, coming from a nation of people farming in rice paddies to blowing the doors off of the USA in terms of economic growth. But what we do have is just the way that the chessboard shook out after World War II. We were able to have our own currency become the world reserve currency, and the fact that our currency is the world reserve currency gives us huge power. And that's not a credit to capitalism. That's more of a credit to, the Americans were the only non-bombed out industrial power at post-World War II. So it's our currency that we got to shove down everyone's throat. And we're going to have to unwind that post-World War II economic order. So yeah, I don't know. I do agree that capitalism was a really, really efficient, innovative system. But the problem with the classic prophecy is that it's predicated on most people being employees and some people being employers. But when and it's going to generate a ton of technology to try to improve the lives of civilization in general. But eventually that technology is going to cancel out most of the relevance of most of the workers to the economy, and you'll end up with a situation where it's untenable to have people divided into employees and employers. And that's, I think, the era we're living in now. We have to move on to a new system where people have different roles. So instead of being a slave or a master, or a serf or a lord, or an employer or an employer, we're going to have different roles of production that have to evolve here. And part of the reason that hasn't already happened, it's long overdue historically, is because of violent crackdowns. Whenever some country decides that maybe we ought to try a communistic mode of government, that's when that's when NATO or CIA or someone's going to come in and just or like the World Bank or the IMF. There are just all these forces that are going to do everything they can to prevent that from happening. And I think that's true of the Soviet Union. They had to spend beyond their means to keep up with our military spending, because we encircled them with all kinds of nuclear warheads in the direct aftermath of World War II. And that kind of bankrupted them. They couldn't compete with that after a while. But anyway, that's...
Well, it's all it's a little esoteric, because when we're talking about the battle of the East versus the West, I mean, it's not really just capitalism versus socialism, because obviously that what you were just talking about there, encircling Russia with military, that's not really a capitalist effort. That's that's just the military industrial complex. And so I don't know what to call it exactly. I mean, obviously, the current paradigm is it's the world bourgeoisie against the world people, because I mean it seems the people at the top in each country are now, well you saw it with the COVID, right? I mean, every country was instituting these lockdowns on the people, and everyone the elite are all in lockstep with each other, right? And so it's really a battle of the people versus our reptilian overlords. And how's that going to play out is the question. And it's a war of ideas. And so, it's to go back to what I was saying. It's a question about these, which ideas are going to be more powerful. I guess, you would hope that, freedom or
more democratic ideals
that the Nazi scourge would not win. Or can you imagine if Indiana Jones just got killed?
That was the end of the line for him. Yeah, he just got shot in the streets of Cairo and failed.
Yeah. I don't know. So yeah, I guess the good news is, I mean, it does seem Well, it's like in Zelda when you're beating up on the boss, and it's like wah, 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 like when you're hacking at him and he's blowing up at the end there. I would like to think anyway. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but yeah.
You know that old quote from George Orwell that the war is not really a war between countries; it's a war between the upper class versus regular Joes like you and me. I can't remember exactly what the ongoing war is meant to ensconce the bourgeoisie into power, and is not at all really whatever the nominal reason in the national borders. That's all secondary. The reason I bring that quote up is because I watched that movie Oppenheimer this week. Did you watch the Oppenheimer film?
No.
Oh, you saw the Barbie movie, but not Oppenheimer, huh?
Sadly.
Dang. Well, so Oppenheimer. It's the issue I have with watching the movie was like watching like Schindler's List or like Saving Private Ryan. You're not like eager to watch it again. For me, you're sitting there watching these guys rushing to produce an atomic bomb in the summer of 1945. So it was like June, July. Like Hitler is like the Germans have surrendered, and the ability of the Empire of Japan to make war is totally compromised. They've been firebombed. Like there were a lot more civilian casualties in Tokyo during the firebombing campaign than the nuclear explosions at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Right?
Do they talk about this in the movie?
Not really. Kinda. They don't, but they don't get to the heart of the matter. Like these guys are sitting there rushing to create this bomb in a situation where it's just not militarily necessary at all. Like they were like, well, we have to force the Empire of Japan to surrender unconditionally, or we're going to have to invade the Japanese mainland with a bunch of farm boys from Ohio and Oklahoma. And,
well, I guess we should say on the System Failure podcast that we don't really buy this narrative that we had to nuke Japan in order to win World War II, right?
Right, you can just leave. Like the Japanese have no access to oil. Their navy is incapacitated. Their production capacity destroyed. It's a nation in smoldering ruin. You can just leave. Right, you don't have to force them to. And that's and then there's all this evidence that Emperor Hirohito was looking for some way to resign, some way to surrender without losing face, and
he didn't want to surrender to the Ruskies, is what they say.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Stalin's preparing an invasion for September of 45 onto the Japanese, one of the big islands, Hokkaido, from the Kamchatka Peninsula. All those armors are getting ready to cross the Sea of Okhotsk or whatever it is to Japan. And we in the U.S. had to make sure that we just pivoted to just open conflict with the Soviets almost instantly as soon as as soon as the ink was dry, on German surrender, we had to turn to take on the Russians because they had a communistic, their government was at least nominally communistic. We couldn't have that, and we had to touch off the bomb as a way of showing the Russians how much better we were than they are and how much they should cede to our demands in terms of carving up Europe in the post-war era. Except for the Russians got the bomb 4 short years later in 1949 and terrified everyone because we just treated it like our diplomacy was so chuckleheaded in 1945 that we just treated the Russians like they were never going to have a bomb, like they didn't get a whole bunch of German scientists and after in the aftermath of World War II like we did, and they shocked us by it was only a 4-year lapse, and so we treated them like they were never going to have the bomb that between 1945 and 1949, and then entered into this insane Cold War, which justifies a lot of military spending, but is just absolutely terrible for both countries involved, and turned out to be catastrophic for the Soviet Union. But man, so watching that movie, you're just, and then of course the punchline here is that J. Robert Oppenheimer, he got kicked off the Atomic Energy Commission for being a communist, in the early 50s, right? So it's like they don't explicitly address it in the movie, but the whole thing, like the fight between capitalism and communism, is at the core of that Oppenheimer movie from beginning to end, if you watch carefully. And it really does make me think about how the war, dropping those atomic bombs, was a move in the war of the bourgeoisie, elite, rich ruling class against the rest of us, the working class proletariat. The atomic bomb was a major move on that chessboard, even if it was an irrelevant one on the World War II chessboard. It didn't really matter to the outcome of the war, but it mattered greatly to this ongoing battle between the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. It was, in other words, it was a stroke in a class war that we don't acknowledge exists here in the United States, and is only understandable through that lens. and it's amazing that people are willing to accept this other lens that it was necessary because we wanted to. We would otherwise have to invade the Japanese homeland. I mean, it's just.
Well, it makes sense why nobody knows the truth, or everyone thinks that we had to bomb Japan to prevent like a U.S. land invasion. I'm sure if we just asked like 10 people on the street, that's what 8 would say.
Why? But then the logical follow-up question is, that's a totally optional land invasion. Why would we go to all that trouble? Just leave. It boggles my mind.
It's a truly shocking moment in history.
Yeah.
We had to drop these nukes to. I mean, it's fitting, I guess, is what it is, or it's about what you would expect.
And you could say that the dropping of those atomic weapons was a bold strike by the ruling class of the United States and Europe against the citizens of not against Russian citizens necessarily, but against American citizens and European citizens. It was our rich against us is what this was all about, because they don't want that communist ideology coming back to America and giving us all funny ideas about it and making us all conscious and aware of this ongoing class war. But of course, you can think about the business plot of the 1938 when the consortium of businessmen tried to overthrow FDR and install him with a fascist dictatorship. So because they replaced him with a fascist dictatorship to avoid getting soaked by taxes to pay for the New Deal. And that reminds me of there was a Marketplace on NPR. There was a piece on the New Deal this week. I downloaded, listened to it, and then they had this whole thing about the New Deal. No mention of the business plot. No mention of FDR writing in his journal that the whole point of the New Deal was to avoid a communist revolution here in the United States. I forget exactly what his line was, but he said if this administration intended a change in economic ideology, well, all we'd have to do is watch with folded arms and just do nothing. In the let the Great Depression destroy the capitalistic means of production. But that we're trying to prosecute this New Deal to save capitalism so that it can continue into the future, and so we don't get a 1917-style Russian Revolution here in the U.S. But no mention of any of that. It was all about, we're going to compare the New Deal to Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, and even one of their historians was like, there's no comparison between Joe Biden's infrastructure bill and the New Deal. The New Deal is huge, but they still carried on with it. It's interesting to see NPR carrying water, but I think that is the historical context with which the Oppenheimer movie should be viewed. But man, crazy stuff. It was a pretty good film. I was just watching it.
I mean, back then they didn't have social media to distract with people, and poor people weren't fat, right? Yeah. And now poor people are fat and distracted by their flat screen TVs and whatnot, and so we're probably less close to the revolution in some ways than back then. So I guess that was a smart move by old FDR to keep the system going.
We do have the internet. That's one thing. It's like the way that the printing press totally took apart late medieval society. I feel like the internet definitely has that potential here. They let that internet out of the bag, and they're in trouble now. I don't think there's any going back.
Well, we certainly are in the thick of a war of ideas. We gotta We got to get away from the Donald versus Biden or whatever. But unfortunately, that narrative permeates the establishment deeply. In every non-establishment people we're all cast put under the broad stroke of just being MAGA people. I'm sure we'd be a MAGA podcast if we posted this on Reddit or something.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's just a way of pigeonholing people, so you don't have to listen to what they're saying. But you're right. I think the blue tie versus the red tie, that is a total distraction. And the fact that the Donald is ensconced in that means that we really ought to be paying more attention, hopefully, to what RFK Jr. maybe, despite his despite the fact there's no daylight between him and the Donald and Biden on their foreign policy.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to why I'm not excited about the Donald.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly does RFK want to keep sending money to Israel? Probably, right? I mean, I like Vivek's take where he supports Israel, but not financially.
Yeah, I liked Vivek too. That dude was awesome. He dropped out of the race, of course, after not finishing as well as he'd hoped in the Iowa caucuses. But at least he was young and energetic and actually, addressing issues that matter to disaffected folks like me, and I guess like you, Brian, and the rest of our 55% who just can't stand the status quo for another year. But maybe but I guess he's gunning for an appointment, some kind of appointment in the possible Trump administration. But hopefully we'll hear more from Vivek, and this won't be the last we see of him.
Indeed.
Yeah. Recently on the JRE, there was this woman, Dr. Diane Walsh Pasulka. I could talk about that, but have you got some meditation that you wanted to bring up before we go down that rabbit hole?
No, let's just talk about Diane.
Okay. Well, so have you had a chance to hear this one, Diane Walsh Pasulka?
I listened to like the first hour of it.
Yeah. Well, see, I think that really it's so she talks about Plato a little bit. You must have heard that bit.
Yeah.
So this woman, Diane Walsh Pasulka, she's a professor out at UNC, University of North Carolina, and she's got all these academic credentials, and she her field of expertise is religious history, and she delved into the Vatican archives, digging up all this stuff about like ascension narratives and other religious what have you from history, and comparing those to like abduction narratives. That people talk about nowadays with the UFO drag me out my bed and probe my anus in the night, sort of thing, and comparing that to like the ascension of Mary or other weird like ascension stories that are, I guess, available in the Vatican archives, which she went to, in the Vatican Observatory. And so the punchline here is that we're closing the loop between like Christianity, Platonism, and the UFO phenomenon that's going on currently, and that these are really all one and the same thing. We've talked on this hallowed podcast before about the crazy Nuremberg lights and the wood cutting that I guess this whole space battle took place over the German city of Nuremberg in 1451, and of course someone made a wood cutting of the crazy things they saw, and I there's one big black diamond shape amongst all the lights and explosions that looks like the command cruiser of Darth Vader from Empire Strikes Back, the Executor or whatever. Yeah, it's like the Vader's flagship. And so I mean, is it? I mean, I really think that's the idea is that like Platonism and angels and demons and the UFOs are all part of the same thing. The weird, the pukas or the boogies that haunt the twilight and the dusk and of our dreams, the space between our awake life and the regular 4D matrix of accepted reality that we think we live in every day. And I don't know, it really does seem like that's the direction that we're headed in here, like some kind of a reconciliation of Platonism, Christianity, and the UFO phenomenon, and like just magic in general, or strange things that were thought never to exist. And so one of the moments in the podcast, which you probably haven't gotten to yet, is the weird space music that the Apollo 10 astronauts recorded. I did hear them talking about that. Yeah, eventually they'll do the recording of it. It's really strange sounding, and I guess according to Pasulka, this is something that NASA trains its astronauts. Like when you get out, outside of the Earth's atmosphere and turn and listen to your radio, you're going to be hearing a bunch of weird sounds and music and just things coming over. You just don't freak out. Expect that. That's like something that astronauts just have to deal with. And her grand, I think, contention is that the U.S. government has a big problem because they haven't been honest with us about what is out there in space. And a lot of our most sober fighter pilots and astronauts don't want to admit to what they've seen. They don't want to be the one to blow the whistle because they don't want to fail their psych evaluations. That's a really, that is like a bottleneck that's keeping these reports from broadly coming out. We did mention the Manhattan Project a few moments ago, in under the aegis of the Oppenheimer movie, and people talk about. I always hear this canard that the government is terrible. Have you been to the DMV? They're incompetent. And they can't. There's no way they could keep a secret. But it's worth mentioning that like Truman didn't know about the atomic tests until after FDR died. He had to be like briefed on it. So like the vice president didn't know what was going on out in Alamogordo, New Mexico. That's pretty wild. And so her Pasulka, Diane Walsh Pasulka, her main contention, as mentioned, is that now like the Chinese are going to space and the Indians, and there's just no way we don't really have a monopoly. Well, it used to be just like the Russians and the Americans, but now there is a lot of nations going up into space, Japan, and that this information is gonna like start coming out, and so they have to kind of get ahead of that, and they have to start disseminating information in a way that's not going to make them look like they totally pulled a snow. they're trying to conceal the fact that they totally, snow jobbed the U.S. public low these past, 50 or 60 years, and that what's going on out there is much crazier than we had previously supposed. And at the very least, the lights in the sky are real and have been all along, and we've been gaslit about that. Interesting stuff. It was a wild podcast. It was one of those wild JREs where you're just like, man, I just have no idea what's real anymore. I mean, it's just insane that these very sober researchers say, I have it on good authority from multiple U.S. government sources that we're in possession of off-world craft and possibly have recovered biological specimens or samples. It's just like, good Lord. I mean, it's really a wild time to be alive.
Yeah, the space sounds is pretty cool. I think 2001: A Space Odyssey is trying to get at this point that space isn't. It's not just some planets floating out there. There's more going on than that. Man, it would be wild if we saw like a space battle in the sky. I mean, we're probably gonna end up seeing that, huh?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to filter those things out when economic systems are working well, they're humming along beautifully. It's easy to just be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see that. I don't want to be the person in my friend group who has to be like, well, unfortunately I did see, a UFO, at the, when I was had to drive down to the dump the other night. It's like, man, but I think that things that the authorities say cannot possibly so, collectively, we have to come to grips with the fact that things that authorities say cannot possibly be so actually are so. And when things are humming along and working well, no one wants to have that conversation. But when things start to collapse and fall apart, then you have to really look around and ask yourself, what is actually happening here? And I think that that's why you get like a revelation like what you had during the Renaissance, where it was discovered. Nicholas Copernicus publishes on his deathbed because he fears retribution from the Catholic Church. Tycho Brahe, a Danish astronomer, takes his calculations to Johannes Kepler, and they're able to publish and finally prove that the sun, in fact, the Earth is in fact in motion around the sun instead of vice versa. And a long way of saying, I think that these re-examinations of reality come when economic systems fail, because that's when authorities are compromised, and you no longer have that top-down structure defining reality for people. And so it's just the situation seems really wild and out of control.
Yeah, well, the public outcry to see what's behind that curtain over there is reaching a fever pitch.
Yeah,
and increasingly hard to distract the public from it. Yeah, man, the UFO business is crazy. Like 10 years ago, no one was taking this stuff seriously.
Yeah.
And now we are.
Ever since 2017, when the New York Times had that article about Commander David Fravor and his LiDAR system on his F-18 Super Hornet and the crazy Tic Tacs he was picking up. And then that letter from the Office of the Naval Observatory saying, we are in possession of vehicles constructed not on this world. You're like, you've got to be kidding me. So either it's some kind of crazy, either this is all some fuckery to try to keep the economic system going. The people who make fortunes off the rest of us when we all wake up and go to work every morning, they would like to keep things humming along as they always have been. But I think that either this UFO business is going to be part of their undoing and the demolition of their last shred of credibility, or like you said about the Donald, it's all a part of it's all like controlled opposition, or it's all a part of a fugazi to keep us ensconced within the system and unable to move on and move forward. And I wonder which one it's going to turn out to be.
Well, I think if it is like Michelle Obama, the chances of UFO stuff happening goes down, but with the Donald or RFK Jr. definitely goes up.
Well, that's assuming that the UFO. Yeah, okay. So you're saying if the establishment is able to regain control for another 4 years, then we can expect. Well, see, I would expect more UFO phenomenon. Then I would expect people to I would almost expect that would make people that the sprites and the fairies and the boogeymen from the outer reaches of our consciousness, I would expect them to show up even more if unless it's all a flim flam to try to keep us from asking too many inconvenient questions, or try to keep us from asking the right inconvenient question.
Well, I just think if the Donald gets elected, we're more likely to see like the Nazi nature of our government, or our reptilian overlords, and that kind of thing is going to lead to increase the chances of divine intervention. Yeah.
Well, I guess we shall see. It's going to be interesting times, one way or another, eh?
Yeah, we're just a couple short months away to know what fate has in store for us here.
All right, well, what do you think, Brian? Should I exhort our listeners once again to send us an email at nop@substack.com and let us know why we shouldn't be advocating for the existence of fairies and gnomes and other crazy phenomena, UFOs and aliens and whatnot? We can, as soon as we get such an email, we'll read it on the air.
Yes, we should do that.
Yeah. So again, that email address is nop@substack.com. And if you want to read some exciting essays about these topics, well, you can go to nop.substack.com and check it all out there.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you guys next time.
See you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.